Just in case you have been living under a rock recently, I want to let you know that Eowyn is an absolutely phenomenal tier 1 commander. I had a couple of good fights with her earlier today and wanted to make an updated video because I have changed the skill build very slightly from my first Eowyn guide. Let's get into it. Alright guys, we'll start things off by talking about a couple of reports. Please go a little bit easy on me, as finding perfectly evenly matched reports is just about impossible in this game. This first fight was against a wounded Eowyn, and I do have 3 levels on her, and I think my gear is a little bit better overall as well. But I wanted to show this fight because this was the first fight leading into this fight, and I will admit that I do have a pretty significant gear advantage over this Theoden. However, my Eowyn had been wounded at least a little bit, and this guy brought T4 units, and I do not have any T4 units for Eowyn since I am Lothlorien. A breakdown of the fight overall is a pretty reasonable amount of commander damage, an amount of healing that I am very happy with given the build that I have opted for on Eowyn, as well as a pretty nice amount of soldier damage, all things considered, especially because I had to hit Swan Knights during the beginning of combat, and those things are incredibly durable and tanky. So let's go ahead and talk about the skill build here. It is very slightly changed from my first Eowyn guide. Do keep in mind that my Eowyn is now up to Respect 13. You might have to cut some points overall. I've opted to max out the entire R5 tree, and that is specifically because I'm able to field 3 melee men cavalry units. If you do not have either pre-riders, marshals, or swan knights, I would probably opt not to take nobility and instead invest those points into Shield Maiden. I've also taken the full Rohirrim tree as well. Cleave is a fantastic skill. It hits super hard and it scales with your speed. I've dumped 1 point into Cripple because it's an extra attack, and I'm a big fan of extra attacks these days, just for going through layered damage reduction, dodging, avoidance / evasion, and things like that. If you don't have the extra points to take 2 in Durnhelm and 1 in Cripple, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. This is just something you can do if you do have a lot of extra respect, or if you choose not to take nobility. I just don't think that this skill is worth it if you can only field Cavaliers and Cataphracts as your men cavalry. And then the rest of the points are just going into Shield Maiden, Attack Vitals, and Defensive Stance. As I was saying a second ago, if you don't take nobility, you can just put those extra points into this skill tree, or if you don't like the 1 point into Cripple, you can invest those into the skill tree as well. If you're really struggling on skill points, I would probably focus on Shield Maiden and maybe just put 1 point in Vitals, 1 point in Defensive Stance. I'll leave that up to your guys' judgment. Overall, I really like having as many attacks as possible, especially because more and more often people are running just 1 command of a troop to eat up attacks. Having extra attacks tends to mitigate that, at least to some extent. I have a Carver with men's strength. This is pretty similar to the Cutlass. I was using it because I had formerly had this on my Arwen, so I already had the item and wanted to give it a test on Eowyn just to see how could she do with some extra focus rather than extra speed. So far, I'm actually pretty happy with the results. I think probably a Melee Might Cutlass is the better choice, but Theoden has my Melee Might Cutlass, and it's really hard, at least at my budget, to have 2 strengthened and refined Melee Might Cutlasses. That's just a lot of cutlasses. I had the extra Carvers, so why not? For the equipment, I went with Scale Mail with Melee Vigor. I also have a Quilted Armor with Focus Protection in my back pocket, because if I know that I'm going to be fighting Galadriel, Sauron, or Oathbreakers, things like that, I can swap this onto whichever commander is going to take that fight. I have set up overall Eowyn as kind of my anti-Sauron, anti-focus commander, so she's the one that usually gets this. It's just a really nice item to have in your back pocket if you can't afford it. Generally speaking, I do run her with the Scale Mail because I am trying to pump her focus at least somewhat. and it gives some melee army defense. She's always going to be running melee units anyway, and the damage reduction on top of the extra defense. Very obviously, the no-brain choice here is the Horseman's Helm with Resolve. This is because she naturally gives all of her mounted units stun immunity always anyways. So Resolve means for the first 3 rounds, your army is, well, if you can refine it enough, your army is going to be immune to madness and immune to stun, the stun part being immune at all times. And then for the accessory slot, I have the Worn Out Smoking Pipe with Sustain. The reason I picked this is because I thought it synergized well with the fact that I was trying to stack Focus, as this does scale with Focus. Plus, it also synergizes pretty well with Frontline Rescue and White Lady of Rohan, these both being heals as well. Let me go back to the equipment. I also have her unique item. I just got that, I think yesterday it was. Yesterday or the day before. I went ahead and did the quest for it and picked it up. I think this is a great option if you know that you're going to be fighting things like ranged unit Gandalf the Grey, Gilgalads, Haldirs. If I had a higher budget, I would definitely try to strengthen this and refine it. However, for now, Theoden is getting my Mieris's Reigns, so all of my gold accessories have been going into pumping this up rather than the Rohan's Refuge. I do think that it has a very nice use in terms of countering ranged units, which are becoming ever more popular in the metagame. And finally, we will finish things up talking about your army composition. It is extremely straightforward as Eowyn, which is one of the nice things. You want to run all men if you can, melee cavalry if you can. So for me, I don't have access to marshals or swans. I do have access to Bree riders, so I'm running Katas, Cavaliers, and Brees. If you absolutely do not have a third melee man cavalry unit, you can run Cataphract Cavalier and sub out the Bree riders for Ram riders. However, she really does perform optimally with full melee men cavalry. I want to go ahead and kind of stress that as well. And just to wrap things up fully, she does require Respect 5. In my opinion, she will really not perform for you without Respect 5. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching.